my mind. I think 95% of anything to do with muscles has to do with making it relax, stretching it, heating it, strobing it, shock waving it, whatever it is, to try and force it to reboot, right? Almost thinking all those models are just saying, hey, just like your phone, if it's not working, just turn it off, unplug your appliances, you plug them back in 30 seconds, and hey, look, it fixed it, right? And I'm pretty sure, when the health of the muscular system is not in question, that model works great, right? But our niche sits in this world that says, what if the muscles are more like fuses? And what if those fuses could be turned down? And what if those fuses say, I can't handle anymore, and keep popping? And then more and more fuses keep popping. And eventually, you've got a body that can't handle very much.
Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset. Your health is one of the biggest influencers of the quality and quantity of time that you have. And while there are many aspects of health, our expertise is exercise. Exercise has been proven time and again to not only improve your health, but also increase your longevity and improve your quality of life. And today we are bringing you a phenomenal guest, none other than Eric Seifert. Eric Seifert is one of Canada's leading professionals regarding muscular function and health. He holds a mastery level designation with the Muscle Activation Techniques MAT discipline, as well as the Resistance Training Specialist RTS program. He was able to partake in the first ever MATRX class, filled with the top 50 MAT specialists, and is currently one of only 73 MATRX full body internship specialists in the world. With more than 16 years as an MAT specialist and over 10,000 hours of experience, he has helped hundreds of clients both prepare for and recover from surgery, injury, chronic issues, and improve their overall quality of life. Eric's goal of improving muscular balance and increased function using MAT and training has allowed him to become one of the most sought-after specialists in the country. He has worked with clients of all ages, from 5 years old to 92, with his experience with professional athletes ranging from current and retired MLB, NBA, NHL, and OHL, both NFL and CFL, as well as Olympians. Eric, thank you so much for joining us, my friend, and welcome to our show.
Thanks very much. It's really nice to be chatting with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. So
I do want to throw something in.
Yeah, please
Not
do.
only is he one of the most sought after MAT specialists in his country, because
Yes.
a lot of our listeners don't know he's from Canada.
That's true.
He's also one of the most sought after MAT specialists here in the US of A.
That's absolutely correct.
Yes.
So it really should be one of the most sought after in North America.
You just have to move to a smaller country, and then you get to be your top dog. That's the way it works.
Exactly, right?
And I do want to say that Eric Seifert is one of the specialists that Charlie and I talk about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie totally is always looking up to Eric, talking about what Eric's doing. And we always are talking about like, hey, if Eric lived here, then you guys could swap. And then I wouldn't have to work on you because you're giant compared to me. And he's one of the few MAT specialists that we would trust wholeheartedly with, any of our clients or our bodies ourselves. And I think we're our biggest critics.
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure.
we're so pleased to have Eric on the show today.
Absolutely. So, Eric, tell us more about yourself. Like, how'd you get into training to begin with?
So my background, I started off like a lot of us as athletes. A lot of us athletes, I'm sure you can attest, end up in the weight room. We spend a lot of time in the weight room and playing power sports. You end up a lot of times looking at, kind of exercises that represent how can I jump faster? How can I run faster? How can I hit harder? That kind of thing. And in the football world, and certainly a lot of the contact sports that I played, you experience a lot of injuries, experience a lot of trauma. And pretty much when I started exercising and really started learning about exercise, my goals were about trying to figure out how to train better so that I could run faster, jump higher, that kind of stuff. It never really occurred to me as a young person that if I did something poorly, injury was a possibility. It really wasn't in my framework. It was more that if you didn't do something well in the gym, you just didn't get the result. There wasn't a negative side effect. It was just big, strong kid, lift, get big and stronger, and see the results of that. So that's a big kind of a different paradigm that I think most people have never evolved past. And then that when I was in university, I broke my back. I had a fracture of my spine and had it misdiagnosed. And when I finally was able to go back to the gym, like I played a whole season on a fracture in my spine.
Wow.
And then when I was able to go back to the gym, because eventually the season was over. That was my draft year. I went to our combine and did as well as I could, but it wasn't, anywhere close to what I could have really done. And then it was kind of like, okay, back to school. And from that point on, I re-injured my back playing basketball. And my buddies decided to teach me squash, which with a fracture in your spine wasn't an awesome experience. But and then needless to say, I re-injured my back that never really healed, but I never really understood what was wrong. And then I got re-diagnosed, and somebody actually took a look at some x-rays and said, yeah, you fractured your back. You can see it on 3 different parts of an x-ray. So now I knew why my nice big strong back was sore all the time and in spasm every once in a while. And so then I didn't train for 5 months of rest. And then when I started back into the gym, I had very definite life body experiences that defined what was good technique and what was bad technique. I had a very real different understanding of good technique. Not only did I feel benefit, but I felt better physically, and bad technique, I felt no benefit, but also the bad side effects. So I probably experienced maybe what most of our clients, more of what our clients experience, rather than the indomitable athlete world, which is like, I don't have any pain, I'm good,
Yeah.
So when you were going through, Charlie, when you were going through university, did you have you went to the gym all the time. Did you ever have any injuries that you had to sort of overcome?
I was very fortunate for the most part. The biggest injuries I had were just sprained ankles. I was a chronic ankle sprainer. I mean, from the time I was in 5th grade through my senior season of college, I was spraining at least one, if not both ankles, at least once a year. But fortunately, I never had any ruptures, anything that required surgery. A couple, smacks to the nose, but nothing, no other fractures aside from that. Yeah, so I feel like I kind of got out, at a very lucky standpoint in that regard.
And how about you, Julie? Did you do any sports growing up?
So I danced and swam. So luckily with swimming, if you get out with clean shoulders, you've done a good job. So I actually didn't have huge issues, but I did break my ankle, and that caused a lot of back pain. So as we all three experience all the time, how closely related certain areas of the body are, especially the feet and the back for some reason. But actually I struggled with fasciitis before my ankle break for years. And I got into MAT because someone worked on my core, and I was like, well, I didn't tell you anything that was wrong, and you completely got it wrong because it's my feet that's the problem. And then I stood up and I was like, oh, my feet don't hurt. I don't know how you knew how to do that. But for years, everyone looked at my knees and down, like my calves, my feet, all that stuff. So it really intrigued me. But yeah, I think you make such a good point where it's like, I think a lot of us, especially if you've been in the gym world or you like to move, we've been the abominable athlete. I do anything, and if I do screw up, no problem, because in 2 days I feel fine. But it does take an experience where it's like, hey, if I consistently do this poorly, I can never work out. Mm-hmm. And I have to figure out a new way to work out so that I can continue on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us have I have chiropractor friends and other osteopath friends, and a bunch of us obviously I think have had experiences. I don't think I've ever met somebody in the healthcare field that didn't have some sports injury or some type of thing, and then were introduced to some therapist or some doctor at some point, and then felt some that was transformative, or that shifted my view, and I think I want to do that, or were inspired to do something like that. And so I think I ended up, from that point on, obviously you're in the gym all the time. So as a football player, what's one of the first jobs you're going to think about doing, is, I live in the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. So there was a part-time job opening when I was finishing school in some management in gym stuff. And I'm so old, personal training didn't really exist back then. And so we started off, I was in a Nautilus facility, primarily Nautilus equipment. And the funny part is, if you're in a Nautilus facility, because it was invented by Dr. Jones, that meant somehow other doctors thought it had some type of medical grading. So they would send people to a place that was full of Nautilus equipment. They would send, instead of going to physio or physical therapy, they would say, oh, you just need a really good, place that has this type of equipment. So I had people with all kinds of injuries, like all kinds of special populations that were walking in, that are walking into a fitness facility that have, recovering from their MS is in remission. They have a joint replacement or they need a joint replacement. They have to learn how to walk again. They've had open heart surgery and are wondering about something like bench press, and somehow medical grade, Nautilus equipment was going to somehow save them for all that. And then I had a boss that hated working with that population, that really didn't like doing programming and seemed to think I really liked it and had an ability to do it. So I had to see a large bunch of people that were sort of more specialized populations and broken people. And then I kind of graduated in my mind. I started personal training. That sort of started to exist. It was kind of like the beginning of that in Toronto. Then I kind of went downtown to work at another gym facility that was specifically personal training and kind of cut my teeth doing that. And then at some point in my career, I kind of thought, you know what, I'm going to sneak out of this world. And I snuck into strength coaching and went into the hockey world, thinking that I was going to have a much easier time, a much easier time with young athletes that were all, in the prime elite athletics. And then I realized a bunch of them moved really badly too. And I saw a bunch of athletes from the ages of 15 to 21 that are all elite level athletes that moved as bad as the injured population of old people or broken people. And I couldn't really figure out how was there any correlation. Like in my mind, I was running away from the injured, broken population. I was going to run towards performance population. And somehow there was some correlation between the two of them, where some of them, at both ends moved, like that little old lady moves better than this young hockey player. And this young hockey player, I'm thinking should be moving well, moves as bad as somebody that's had open heart surgery, like, or needs a hip replacement. What's going on? So I came out of that, with some different, again, paradigm shifts of there's something different. And lo and behold, as my career continued to expand back into the personal training world, I got exposed to MAT back around 2001, thereabouts. And I had an experience myself, like you, Julie, where I got off a table and I had a whole host of expectations of what I'd had with therapy. And all of a sudden I got up and I was ready to work out. Like I thought, well, I could lift weights right now. And I didn't feel therapized. I didn't feel like somebody had run over me, like, okay, great. Thanks for the therapy. I'm all crushed now. And, which was my previous experience with almost every therapy, which football players are it's normalized for them to feel like, oh, you're going to get punished with therapy. It's expected to feel beat up after the therapist finishes with you. And then you recover just like an exercise experience. And you sort of feel better after. Or it doesn't change, but you kind of just never really paid attention to that. It just moves around a little bit. And so when I had that experience myself, I thought I need to really look into this. And I was very fortunate to be amongst some of the, first people learning MAT. And it's changed my career arc and many people's lives ever since.
Absolutely. So, you have your private practice now. And so what would you say constitutes the type of clientele that you work with now? Is it more the population that you were seeing at the Nautilus gym? Is it more the athlete side of things? Is it a nice mixture of both?
Yeah, I define our kind of populations almost like three different customers, if that makes any sense. We have three different archetypes that I would say. We have the top end where I'm seeing professional athletes of all different sports that I might be working with. And then I have I'm going to call them the bottom end, but let's just call them the other end of the continuum, where I have diseased people, people that are dealing with all kinds of, never-ending problems, from cerebral palsy, peripheral neuropathy, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, dealing with autoimmune problems, people dealing with all kinds of more complex issues, stroke, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I have a group of people that I would call the middle group, that is probably people that don't consider themselves sick or at the lower end, and don't consider themselves, or don't sort of qualify for being professional athletes. And those people in the middle, are basically trying to be better every day, maybe hurt themselves with, in terms of sliding in the performance direction, but for the most part are everyday people that are trying to get better every day.
I know today we're going to talk about, one of the specific categories you brought up. But before we jump into that, can we talk a little bit about your quote unquote diseased population that you work with? And Charlie and I see a handful of these type of individuals as well. And one thing that we find is that many people that have a dis-ease, meaning they struggle with something in their health. Maybe it's mechanical in nature with their muscles or joints, or maybe it's neurological in nature. But what does exercise and MAT do for these people? Because it's certainly not a treatment. It's not a treatment for MS. It's not a treatment for a spinal fracture or whatnot. But what do you see that people are seeking out and that you are able to provide through exercise and through MAT that help this population?
So, great question. The obviously there's quite a variety in terms of that group and what they might need, but for the most part, we spend our time in the muscular system, and obviously those are the workers, right? We want to talk about joints and how they move and all those type of things, but the things that move those joints, right, are muscles. And the health of the muscular system, whether it's metabolic response, whether it's a maintaining of metabolic engine, whether it's immune response in terms of how the immune system reacts to too much force, or its inability to handle its environment. Those are things that might, jump out in terms of how exercise might participate in helping those people. But obviously MAT sits in that very small, unique niche where, instead of trying to massage everything, because almost everything in the massage world, everything that's muscles for the most part, and I don't know where in my mind, I think 95% of anything to do with muscles, it has to do with making it relax, stretching it, heating it, strobing it, shock waving it, whatever it is, to try and force it to reboot, right? Almost thinking all those models are just saying, hey, just like your phone, if it's not working, just turn it off, unplug your appliances, you plug them back in 30 seconds, and hey, look, it fixed it, right? And I'm pretty sure, when the health of the muscular system is not in question, that model works great, right? But our niche sits in this world that says, what if the muscles are more like fuses? And what if those fuses could be turned down? And what if those fuses say, I can't handle any more, and keep popping? And then more and more fuses keep popping. And eventually you've got a body that can't handle very much. And so I find if you're looking at those people, whether it's cerebral palsy and they have an issue, or they've had stroke, the body is constantly trying to find a solution to how can it support itself, how can it guard you, how can it protect you, and how can you stay prepared for whatever its environment has to interact with. And so I think exercise could be used inappropriately with that group, and very often, unfortunately, has been used. Not in every case, but obviously the ones that are in front of me, exercise has not produced the answer potentially that it could have, because their bodies can't handle more. And anytime you ask them to do more, their bodies have a tendency to break. But because they have a status or a designation of dis-ease, very often those people are, they're given this sort of, you're overreaching, you have had a stroke, you're overreaching, you are 72, you're not 18 anymore, you're just asking for too much. And for a lot of those people, they just keep reducing their life down and reducing their expectations, because it keeps getting reinforced that, keep working hard at it. Oh, you did too much. You have had a stroke, or you do have MS. So because they're left in this sort of logic problem, it keeps reinforcing that, oh, I should just lower my standards. I should stop working so hard. I should reduce my life down. And I find that exercise for everybody has an opportunity to transform them or be a hammer, right? You have a chance for it's the challenge is this too little, too much, just enough, this Goldilocks zone. And how do we help people understand that it might be completely about, how is their body, how do we interact with their body, how do we assess their body, and then how do we provide an environment for them to recover properly so that they can feel the benefit of exercise, they can understand, through how their body moves, they can feel exercise differently, they can take advantage of all the benefits of exercise. I mean, I think I saw in university some list of over 100 different things that were the benefits of exercise. I don't know if you guys saw that in kin programs and stuff, but it was like some of it seemed like, okay, lower blood pressure, lower, like very science-based things, and other things were so out there. It was like, feel better about yourself, and they were all these touchy-feely things. I'm like, well, how do they quantify that? Right? How do you write that on a graph? Do you feel better about yourself because you're fit? Right? Positivity, like all these things that to me seemed so kind of not measurable, and one person's, one man's treasure, another person's garbage. Like, how are you measuring those things? But if you said exercise is supposed to be the path, if you asked a bunch of these people and they said, yeah, you just exercise more and you'll feel better. Just exercise more and you'll feel less like your MS is impacting your life, And for most of these people, that's almost a bold-faced lie, right? You have to really understand, how am I going to help these people through MAT be able to handle more, and then really help them judge how much is exercise going to help them versus, man, more exercise is better, and all of a sudden exercise is the problem. Corrective exercise is good for you, and now corrective exercise is the problem. So hopefully I've answered that. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, and I think you painted the picture so nicely with the Goldilocks analogy, because I feel that, at least in my experience, this group, as you said, it has the opportunity, just as anyone, to transform you or to be a hammer on you. But these individuals, that line, that like zone of Goldilocks zone is so fine and can be difficult to find. And so these individuals usually feel like, well, I either go to therapy or do nothing. And it's like, hey, well, there's a lot of things you can do, but here's the catch. It might not look like what you used to do, and it might not look like, anything you might see as a suggestion in a magazine or online, but we can figure something out. So I appreciate your perspective so much.
Yeah, I think the sense of three-dimensional medicine, let's say it that way. What if we talked about two-dimensional medicine? You're either sick. If you talk to like long-distance runners, like extreme endurance athletes, there's two things. You're either training or you're sick. And if you sit down and you ask them, when's the last time you were, not A or B? When was there a C? And they will stare at you, and it's like a feedback loop is just going through. They're like, I don't know. I don't. Oh wait, I don't remember. And so for most people, if you said, well, there's too little, and there's too much, and there's just right, and unfortunately, yeah, is it an easy thing to solve? We love the well, just train or not. And unfortunately, that's way too simplistic, especially for specialized populations. And yeah, for most of them, they overdo it. And then they are off to therapy. And then they, at some point, they might just throw in the towel and say, you know what, every time I do too much, I get hurt. And eventually that wears down most people's personal ability to say, I'm just stick my head in there one more time. I hear this exercise thing is supposed to be awesome. I keep finding out it's sort of, no, it's not. Oh, one more time. No, it's not. And eventually most people will, hope is a very expensive thing to lose. Right?
Well, Eric, no, I definitely appreciate those viewpoints because, kind of like Julie was saying, those are the types of conversations that we have with a number of people and not even just the people who are near the end of the continuum where you talked about having it in more of a diseased state, but even people like you're talking about kind of in the middle or upper middle of the continuum where, for the most part they're doing well, but they're maybe trying to push themselves into this athlete realm, and it's like you're not there right now. And you know, we need to adjust what your expectations are for the time being, so then we can build you up to be able to get in closer to that realm. You know, I mean, I don't know what your experience with that has been like, but I feel like there's a number of times, especially with, you know, recreational activities that people think they should be able to do no matter what, whether it's, you know, like golf or tennis or something like that. It's like, okay, well, just because, you know, the majority of the people that you see at your club are, you know, 50 plus doesn't mean that those who are 50 plus should be playing golf as much as you want to be playing golf based on, you know, your body's personal what you have going on. And so I think that Goldilocks zone for some people is really small, for some people is much bigger, but I think that conversation spreads across the continuum of people that we interact with.
Yeah, I think if I speak to that, then the people at the top end of the continuum, the highest performers, have metrics established. Mm-hmm. They understand what is necessary to do their job at the highest level. They are being measured, and performance is constantly reinforced. So that is a group that is keenly aware of the preparedness that they must participate in, and are given some pretty stiff markers that they must maintain. So it's not hard to speak to that group. The group at the other end, the diseased group, also have tremendous amount of metrics in place. They are also, believe it or not, an easy group to talk to, as complex as they might seem to a number of people on the outside, because they have a conversation already in their head that is going on about the scale, like, well, how far could I fall? What have I lost today? Or what do I need to do some of the simple activities of daily living? And sometimes improving those things is drastically going to improve their lives rather dramatically. Where if you look at the group in the middle, if I'm going to use that framework, sure, they are some of the hardest group to talk to, because they feel, as you said, they should be able to, you know, dunk like they did in high school, and they haven't picked up a basketball in 20 years, and they're going to say, oh yeah, this is easy, you know, and that whole, oh, it's just like riding a bicycle. I'm like, have you ridden a bicycle in 20 years, you know? So sometimes you see these people, and, you know, whether you're watching Fail Army or America's Funniest Home Videos, you're seeing people do these ridiculous things like, yeah, there I am on a pogo stick, and I'm, you know, I'm seemingly healthy, seemingly sane human that is doing something really stupid, like getting on a skateboard in a fish bowl or something, or
sure,
you
yeah,
know, like, yeah, I'm gonna pop an ollie, watch this, and you know, and you're like, what is going on? That guy just broke at least 3 bones in his body doing that thing. And so I think that group in the middle that have really unreasonable expectations is that I'm not sick. And I'm not really a high performer, but I'm okay. And they don't have any metrics. They have no metrics establishing what is their normal, you know, what are their expectations. So most of them are fed a gym sort of fantasy of, you just walk into CrossFit, train like an athlete, and you will be one. Or you walk into a yoga class and just do a lot of yoga and you'll be amazing at this. And, you know, I'm a firm believer of, you know, some people are very good at some activities that they can do and are born to it kind of thing. And other people just somehow think, if I just try really hard and practice a lot, I could be in the NBA. And I would say, or I'd be in the NFL. And I can tell you that stepping in an NFL locker room, no, that's not possible.
Exactly.
No, not possible, you know. And no, you wouldn't want to be on the field with any of these guys. Like,
yeah.
That would be a quick trip to every hospital, you know.
Exactly.
Right? And so that group in the middle thinks they're not invulnerable, but really have no sense, because there's not a lot of pressure on them. There's no metrics established. They have no pressure because they feel relatively healthy, even though they might be unfit. They really haven't pushed themselves, so there's no real testing ground. So that group can be a very funny, frustrating group to work with, because they don't really have performance pressure, and they don't really have the pressure of being diseased and concerned about their health arc. So they think they've got loads of time and loads of space when sometimes they're really only one small problem away from, I'll say to people, 1 inch of water is not a problem till you're right here, right under your, under your mouth sort of thing. It's like, or maybe under your nose hole, right? You're 1 inch from there, we have a problem now, right? And so then somebody has a sprained ankle, and now they got back pain that won't go away. Now they got neck pain that won't go away. And now they're having to invest huge amounts of money in therapy because they can't figure out, man, I just twisted my ankle and you know what? My back hurts now. My shoulder's a problem. I got a frozen shoulder. I'm stuck with this torticollis. I don't know what's going on. I'm on lots of drugs. And, now we're into a whole different arc.
So let's kind of progress into this third group now that you've described, where it's like this super high performance. Like when it's a people that you see on TV, it's a people that, when you talk about, they get paid to use their body at the highest level, it's those people. Talk about kind of how your work integrates with what they're doing, because I know that you work with teams in a team setting. I know that you work with individual athletes on a consulting basis. And so kind of what have you seen to be the addition of your skill set from both a team setting and kind of on an individual basis, and how it helps these athletes?
Well, obviously, because MAT lives in the world of helping bodies produce and tolerate forces, right? Their entire, whether it's, a ballerina or whether it's a football player, those forces are extreme. Whether it's even a professional musician, funny enough, of all things, has extreme pressure on their muscular system relative to practice and the amount of force that they have to put in, and maybe even the sensitivity of that system that manages, everything from elite athletic success to advanced, ballet and dance to, being able to handle wrestling at the highest level or any of those things. I mean, obviously, force and the ability to modulate and control all those things. Football is the easiest one to understand because obviously contact sports is almost always, especially the NFL, it's almost like, hey, it's a car wreck on every play, is usually the comment. My experience has always been those athletes are competing at the highest level despite some of the injuries that most of us would just stop.
Yep.
The level of athleticism is so shocking that they can still compete. I mean, if some of them were competing against someone like myself on a football field, most of them could cut most of their limbs off and still beat me. You know what I mean? They would still be relevant. But the fact that they're playing against other elite athletes at that highest level and still being able to maintain levels of performance is just mind-blowing. So they have to be able to assist them, to be able to help them recover and still be able to maintain the level of practice and performance is where I think MAT fits for a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we get into performance, I'm not really sure if you take elite athletes that you're promising bigger, stronger, faster. I don't believe treating someone, I mean, you might see some ultimate, I mean, most of them are at such a top level of what they're doing. What you're really trying to do is preserve the arc of their ability, as opposed to they have they can still maintain some 80th percentile of what they need, but it's so much work for them to do it. I think if you facilitate, they might go, wow, I've got 85% now of what I need to do. So you improve them 5%, but the difference is it's effortless.
Yes.
So they go from high performance, high effort to higher performance, but easy effort. And all of a sudden that becomes an incredibly different mental space for an athlete. That's an incredibly different experience for them to, all of a sudden take in way more information and still be able to respond. I think that's an important difference.
And to me, that really speaks to the kind of recovery aspect of it all, of being able to go from, like you're saying, that like going back to the NFL, going through that car wreck 1 week and then having to prepare to go through it again. Well, look, if you can get, back to your game ready faster, your body is going to be better prepared going in. And yes, it's going to help week to week, but over the course of a season, it's going to help a lot. And then, over the course of a career as well.
Yeah. So their arc or their if you said over what is really a tremendously long season, if you're talking about the NFL or any professional sport season, is just a grind.
Yeah.
If people are talking about this singular game and all this other stuff, it's like, yeah, but then do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again, and keep going and keep going and keep going for months of this super high level, intense environment, and then hopefully you make it to the playoffs. Then do it again,
Right.
keep doing it again with an even higher level of stuff, And so, I think the NFL is talking about trying to add an extra game to the season, and the Players Association is arguing over the money involved in therapy. That what would that need for retired players, because most players are barely holding it together by the end of a season, and what that would do to the amount of therapy they might need to survive that, if that makes any sense, just for one more game kind of thing. So at the end of the day, they realize most of them are kind of band-aiding things as the season goes along, and it is really, they always say, it seems like a sprint, it's more of a marathon. And those guys that run out at the front of the marathon as fast as possible. I remember hearing about Lance Armstrong running his first marathon, and they said he was like shot out of a cannon. And of course, he said, this is one of the hardest things I've ever done, because he was completely not, geared for the concept. And he came out like, this is like a sprint. I'm just going to run the whole thing. And he was not paced properly, and he got crushed, So I think if you could think MAT as a recovery model for a lot of these athletes, you could actually see them progressing through the season versus this constant sort of battle with regression. Like, how could you slow down the loss as the cumulative injuries keep going?
So Eric, you work with a handful of individuals, but also professional teams. And in my brain, if you're a professional athlete, any therapy, any therapist, any body thing that you want to have done, you could probably gain some kind of access to, whether you hire them individually or the team is supplying them to you. But in your experience through talking to players one-on-one, what are they perceiving, and what do you see as MAT providing to them relative to other stuff that's really common for them to receive or get on their body, or get done to their body, I guess we could say?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I laugh when I'm talking about MAT. I'll say I'm a really good screwdriver, and it's kind of funny because some people like stare at me like, what? But if they said that sometimes when I'm using example, like in a multidisciplinary environment, whether you're working with individuals that have access to chiropractic, they have access to massage, they have access to, pretty much anything. I've been in Major League Baseball training rooms, and there's literally doctors standing around just waiting to pounce on people. There's all kinds of people. I think I had one of the guys came in, he had a turf burn, and I watched 3 doctors like put on gloves. 3 doctors put on gloves. One was holding the swabs, one was holding the ointment, and I was just like, what am I watching? Like, this is ridiculous, right? But these guys are literally standing around waiting for these athletes. And so it's not always a question about, which one is better. It's more like the timing of A, what does that tool do? And B, when is it done in a certain order? Does that make sense? And so sometimes we've all had to build IKEA furniture, right? If you built the chest of drawers, and if I said to you, with this analogy, if I said to you, they give you most of the stuff, right? But if I said to you, you know what, start from the finishing nails, those little tiny nails and the backing, I want you to start there because they give those to you, right? I want you to start there, and I want you to build it that way. And most people would stare at me and say, Eric, they says finishing nails in the end, so that means it's done at the end. And you look at these silly little nails and you think, how important could these be? So you think, what, build the whole thing, just don't bother with those finishing nails. And then what happens, this poor chest of drawers is all wobbly, and it's like, well, so wait a minute, it matters, but it matters it's done in a certain order. And so I think a lot of times when you're thinking about MAT, and we have an awful lot of people that are very good at what we do, but sometimes we can get lost in, we're this really great screwdriver, but we can't be in everything. And so when you're working in multidisciplinary team environments, you realize that there is somebody that is good at that. Somebody else is a wrench. Somebody else is a whatever, is a widget. And you could just have to kind of focus on what's in front of you in that time. And then how well can you communicate with the other tool users on what end? Like, hey, where did you just come from, and what did they find? And now can I just keep working with that? And then when I'm handing you off, where are you going next? And okay, now maybe suggest this, this, and this. But the next worker is gonna have some information from me, and then able to empower the athlete to kind of communicate that, and not just drop them off at the next station, and have the next guy kind of plow through your work and just be like, wait a minute, what did you treat? Oh, so athletes can have access to, in an NFL environment, it's like an 8-hour day of therapy. They're just, from one thing to another. Somebody's going to stretch them. Somebody's going to train them. Somebody's going to make them do this. And they're going to do a sauna. Then they're going to do whirlpools. Then they're going to do infrared sauna. Then they're going to do heat deprivation float tanks. And then they're going to do sunlight therapies. And then they're going to do another set of massage. And then they're, it's just like, oh my God, so at the end of the day, all you can do is keep in front of them, kind of your aspect, and then realize that you're part of the whole team to continue to help give them information. And my feedback from my players has always been, okay, yeah, this fits in somewhere for me. This gives me access to this and allows me to not just, roll through one table after another table after another table. I think it gives them a lot more feedback. Their bodies, not, they're used to getting beaten on, but they start to make some choices for themselves based on getting better body awareness and better feedback from themselves. They're used to reporting to me. That's something else that athletes sometimes don't do. They just roll into the next person. But once I start asking for information, I start asking them to report to me, and then I start passing on information to the next worker, they start participating differently. They start, kind of expecting and wanting to keep notes. So that helps them, I think, participate differently. Instead of just drop the body off, I'll pick it up on Tuesday, they start actually taking some ownership. And then those are the athletes that I think are going to last longer. The athletes that start to really recognize that their tool is like a great driver with a shitty car. Mm-hmm. When they start taking care of their car and being a great driver, and they start talking to the mechanic, and they start, kind of thinking about what can they do to take better care of this car, then they start having longer careers.
Eric, you brought up some really good points, and some that I really, really appreciate. First being, you brought up this idea that everyone is a professional at their own tool, right? And yep. I think a lot of people in the bodywork field, MAT specialists, chiropractors, massage people, anyone that's working with the body, I feel like we all are very tempted to often step out of our wheelhouse. And I appreciate that you brought that up, because we all are good at something, but that means we might not be that good at something else, which is completely cool, completely great. But also that there is kind of a role and a spot for many things. And maybe for you right now, whether you are a professional athlete or in the other categories Eric has brought up, one of these tool workers might be really impactful for you at a time in life, and maybe later a different tool worker. So I thought you brought up a really good point with that, and I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, I think, thank you. And I think sometimes analogies sort of have goods and bads to them, but if you wanted to go listen to the symphony, and there's a place for certain solos, right? And sometimes a lot of different instruments working together really are what we call music, and sometimes the other guys quiet down, and but if you came for the violin solo and all we got is a kazoo, you're going to give it a shot, right? And sometimes they'd be like, well, at least we filled in with something. But if somebody walks in and says, here's an actual violinist, and they're really good at it, then it's like, well, I've been trying to kind of cover that, but obviously this is the role for you. So I think a lot of times when people are left with, this is what I can do, and this is, I'm going to try. I don't think people, I like to think the better of people. I don't think people are trying to step out of their wheelhouse. I'm really giving people a lot of credit now, but are trying to step out of people's wheelhouse because they don't want to help more. Does that make, I think they want to help. And so the temptation is almost, what else can I do? And so when you're working by yourself, you might have to be more than one thing. You might have to be more than one instrument. But if you're in an environment where there is other workers involved, they are natural people to that's your solo, man. That's not my solo. There are natural places for you to hand off. And I think that if we try and work and try and bridge the information to more other workers, then it's like, oh, this is how these two things could work together. This is how these three things could work together. Literally in Buffalo, when I'm working with the Bills, they have me working between, someone would see me, then go to the chiropractor right after me with information from me, and then the chiropractor would hand them off to the sport acupuncturist. And they would be literally like the players called it the body shop, because we would literally go from one guy to another guy to another guy. And it was like, yeah, he's going to reboot things. We're perfect. I'm going to make them more able to handle stuff, make it easier on the chiro. The chiro can do smaller adjustments. And then the guy that takes care of the acupuncture is just like, hey, I can just simply reboot this now. Sometimes it worked in different orders, but ultimately it's more not I do that. You don't need anyone else, So if you have access to more people, amazing. That's great.
So Eric, I'm curious, what do you do currently now that you've gone through everything with your back and everything from an educational perspective? What do you currently do, to maintain the health and function of your body on a daily and weekly basis?
I am a big proponent of meditation. I do an awful lot of my own meditation. Most of us, probably don't spend enough time, especially people that like ourselves, that have to deal with complex problem solving every day and have to be in environments where you're constantly interacting with other people, that you do need some alone time, and some space for yourself. I don't work out anywhere close to the way I would back in the day playing football. I don't find much need for that. I find just more, I work out probably a 20-minute, maybe 25-minute workout for myself is pretty much all I need. Our jobs are pretty physical, and depending on what season I'm in, that, my job gets even more physical when you have humans that are, 100 pounds bigger than you, kind of thing. That's a pretty big bunch of guys. So that might be what Julie experiences here. It's like, but yeah, when our jobs get more physical, I have to find ways to more rotate the tires rather than train. So I have to kind of find ways to think some things are getting constant training for me. Forearms never get a break. My neck and traps never get breaks, so there are certain things. My back certainly gets an awful lot of work. There's certain things I do to try and round out my body in terms of just more like preventative, really. I don't have right now any big physical goals in terms of stuff other than just running around. I've got two little guys at 6 and 8, so they keep me relatively busy. So I have to stay strong for violent pillow fights every once in a while, and wrestling. So far, I can still take both of them at the same time, so it's all good.
I love it.
So actually, whenever Charlie has a client that's kind of his size, not a lot of people come into our studio unless they're professional athletes that are anywhere close to Charlie's size. So whenever we do, I always sit in the office and think, oh my gosh, this is the best time ever, because Charlie finally gets to realize what it feels like to work on someone that is 130% of your size or 150% of your size. Seriously.
Yeah, at my office, it's a bit of a bizarro world when somebody, because Charlie's a bigger man than I am, but I'm 6'2", 240, so I'm not a small guy, but I kind of laugh when my staff they're used to seeing me bigger than everybody. And then the athletes come in and they see me staring at someone's chest and, talking up at them. And there's sort of this bizarro world of like, whoa, wait a minute, Eric looks like a little person now, so yes.
Yeah, it's quite an experience, definitely, getting that shift in perspective, no doubt about that. So, Eric, is there anything that we haven't asked you that we should have asked you about your area of expertise?
Oh, my goodness gracious. No, I think we covered an awful lot. I think the battle for us is just continuing to explore working well with others. I think that's an important thing for almost every therapy discipline, is that, nobody got into therapy to not help others. But it's sometimes tough for us to keep working in other communities and keep trying to bridge our information out and just see where it fits. At the end of the day, our tool has so many applications and so many ways, but we just don't know the boundaries of how it's going to affect that chiropractor's work, how it's going to affect the massage therapist's work, how it's going to affect how the osteopath works with a client. And I think, to name just a few, but obviously if we're asking questions about how our work is affecting those things, other people will start to want to explore seeing how muscle activation techniques could facilitate other responses. I think obviously I don't get to treat everybody. I don't know that MAT solves everything. I would doubt that very much it solves everything. But like we talked about at the beginning, the exercise and the body's ability muscle-wise to do more is probably a gateway into a bigger Goldilocks zone, the way we talked about it. And I think if people are having trouble with what they're currently dealing with, then yeah, reach out to an MAT practitioner. And if you have other practitioners that you're working with, it might be very interesting to see what MAT brings, a muscular system brings. And if you're in the fitness side of things, the way you talked about, Julie, and the exercise world seems to be beating you up more, there's certainly a question about whether your muscular system can handle it, and probably reach out and find an MAT practitioner.
So along those lines, where can people reach out and learn more about you, find out more about you, whether it's, through social, through your website?
Yeah, my company's name is Core Muscle Activation up in Toronto. If you're in Toronto, feel free to give us a call. I'm sure, Charlie, you can either put some information together, that kind of thing. I would definitely say our website, coremuscleactivation.com. I think my Instagram is core_muscle_activation. It sounds pretty simple, all these different things.
So Eric, the question that we wrap up with for all of our guests is, what is your definition of health?
Oh, wow. Okay, great. So my definition of health is certainly mental and physical and emotional health are kind of, in my mind, tied together. I think they're three parts of the same thing. Obviously, our physical health is maybe the easiest one to measure. But I think, obviously, having a strong body, however that's measured for you, is going to give you a platform of which you can be more healthy emotionally and potentially even more healthy mentally, whether it's a Greek philosophical perspective. I think there's an Aboriginal thing up here that says, man with health has 1,000 wishes, and man without health has one wish. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's one part of it. I would say that our physical health is another version of giving us a portal to pretty much anything we might possibly want to do.
Right on. I love it. I mean, that definitely vibes with everything that we talk with people about and everything that, we try to communicate on our platforms through this podcast. So I can definitely appreciate where you're coming from with that. So, man, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us this evening, to share your experiences, to share with your expertise with us. Man, it was such a joy connecting with you, learning more about your backstory, and gaining insight into your perspective on a lot of the work that you do and how we go about helping people. So really, truly thank you for sharing this time with us.
Oh, absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thanks very much.
So if you're looking for an MAT specialist or personal trainer in the Toronto area, make sure you check out Core Muscle Activation, because they obviously are just doing excellent work with people, with clients, with people in the diseased category, all the way up to the professional athlete. And Eric and his team, they are just one of our closest colleagues, and we are so proud to be serving alongside of them here stateside.
So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is trying to figure out a way to exercise? I feel like the exercise just doesn't feel right for my body. Every time they try to exercise, it feels like exercise makes them worse. Or who do you know that's maybe in that middle category that feels like, oh, I should be able to do the things, are pushing themselves really hard and they find themselves constantly flared up? Or maybe who do you know that's in that super elite category from a physical fitness perspective? Share this podcast with them so they can learn about the work that Eric is doing and the work that a lot of our colleagues are doing within the MAT community to help people, regardless of where they are on that spectrum, increase what Eric was calling that Goldilocks zone. Allow their bodies to work and their muscles to work in a manner that they're designed to work, where they can tolerate exercise and they can tolerate the demands of daily life, so they can keep doing all the things they want to do and they enjoy doing for as long as they want to do them. And while you're online, if you wouldn't mind, head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this information when they're looking for podcasts on exercise and when they're looking for podcasts on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.